Watch this.
So we're going another 2 weeks. We've made it this far, and it's working. Sure, they moved the finish line, but we can still see it, right? Our COVID-19 numbers are dropping, both in the number of new confirmed cases per day and the mortality rate in Idaho. That's great news. We're actually flattening the curve. But the extension of the statewide stay-at-home order will continue to put the squeeze on a lot of businesses across the state. Governor Brad Little announcing today his order, which he first issued on March 25th, is now amended and will now end at the end of the month. He did ease up on it a little bit, though, saying some businesses that were previously non-essential, they can add themselves to the essential list, but they have to follow certain criteria to do so. Joey Prechtel is outside the State House right now, and Joey, businesses that can offer curbside service or delivery and stay at a distance were already, well, somewhat open. So who falls into this new category?
Well, Brian, when I asked the governor that question, he did give me a few examples. Think of stores like garden shops, flower shops, and jewelry stores. It's essentially businesses that can mimic what restaurants are being asked to do in providing that curbside service and providing those delivery or mail options. Now, the extension of this statewide stay-at-home order comes as several elected leaders and conservative groups have criticized the governor for carrying out the stay-home order. Boise State Public Radio reported that top House Republicans asked the governor to let go of control. Meanwhile, Raul Labrador, who is the chair of the Idaho GOP, said in a letter today, the cure, or closing down businesses, cannot be worse than the disease. He said we need to be mindful of the disease, but said that Idahoans need to return to work. Meanwhile, the governor said the measures that are in place are needed right now.
Science tells us if we don't time these measures right, then we can worsen the outcome for citizens' health and the economy weeks and months down the road. If we fail in these mitigation measures, we can expect a second wave of infections to occur.
Now, another part to this order is that people visiting Idaho from out of state are being asked to self-quarantine themselves for at least 14 days, with some exceptions, such as if they're traveling to Idaho to provide an essential service, or if they live in another state and they work in Idaho, or if they live in another state and they need an essential service that's in Idaho. Meanwhile, the governor says he wants people to get back to work, but he also said that he needs to keep in mind the health and safety of all Idahoans. Brian?
All right, thank you very much, Joey. Well, surprised by the governor's announcement today? Some of us, maybe. There's a vocal contingent on both sides, though, of this pandemic, of the shutdown, that is. And in a state like Idaho that prides itself on independence, I think a lot of people were hoping the governor was ready to put it back into the hands of the people, as you heard Joey just allude to. But he listened to the science, his team of experts, his coronavirus working group, who all told him to extend it. And we're doing it, but we're not done. It's a balancing act for sure. How to protect the health of Idahoans while also worrying about their economic welfare. So while the governor's amended order does open the door for a few more businesses to reopen their doors, it certainly doesn't include everyone.
To be clear, this excludes some non-essential businesses where people simply cannot safely social distance, such as nightclubs, bars and restaurants for dine-in, indoor gyms and recreational facilities, hair and nail salons, and public events and gatherings.
Hair and nail salons. And while the governor said nobody wants to get Idaho back to work more than he does, the extended stay-at-home order is a big financial blow for thousands of Idahoans who are asking, why aren't we considered essential? Kim Fields picks up the story from there.
So you were listening to the governor's news conference this morning. It was not good news for someone in your business.
No, it was not good news.
Tell me your thoughts on that, Erin.
Well, it's kind of frustrating because we're not considered an essential service.
Erin Swinson is a licensed cosmetologist. Like all barbers and cosmetologists in the state of Idaho, she's been out of work for 21 days now since Governor Little's first stay-at-home order.
And it's kind of scary, like 30 days without income is, it's, more than an inconvenience.
So your income has been cut totally. I mean, not in half, not by a quarter.
Nope.
It's been completely cut.
No income. we live day to day when it comes to income. So we don't have an employer who's going to pay us for time off or anything that goes with having a corporate or a state job.
Just like with the first stay-at-home order, feelings of confusion and unfairness among the public about what's been deemed essential and non-essential business. The governor saying he relies on public health officials to help make that decision.
I'm glad I'm not the governor.
It's tough. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I just think that with a process, with PPEs, with a face mask and gloves, I think, and proper sanitation, I really think that we should be able to work. But we do see, drive-through coffee shops and stuff that are open, that there's a lot of people who are, lots of people are interacting. Mm-hmm. And they don't necessarily have PPE, they don't have masks or gloves on or what have you. They're touching money, they're touching your cups. And then with stylists, barbers, and anybody who is licensed by the Idaho Bureau of Occupational Licenses, we have a really stringent sanitation and disinfectant process that we have to go through anyway. So we are probably one of the most sanitized places that you can go.
But for now, all she can do is wait.
My fellow stylists and barbers are just really concerned. When is this going to end? It's our livelihood.
So what are you doing in the meantime, Erin? How are you coping? How are you getting by?
It really depends on the day. Reaching out to friends.
We may be asking, can't Erin just cut hair from home? Well, sure, she could fly under the radar and do that, but that's also against the rules, and she could lose her license if she does. Erin says she's not going to do that. She's doing the right thing, no matter how much of a financial blow it delivers to her. So what went into Governor Little's decision today? What factors did he consider? A lot of our leaders have been looking at COVID-19 forecast models to gauge what we do next. And a lot of them have looked at this model from the University of Washington. And it can be broken down by state. It paints a pretty picture when it looks at Idaho. You can see that numbers dropping off significantly compared to how bad it could be. However, it's not the most accurate depiction of what is happening or could happen in the Gem State. I spoke with Dr. Benjamin Reidenauer today, a biomedical researcher in the University of Idaho Math Department. He told me that UW model, basically too simplistic, and it's a more of a statistical model based on what happened in Wuhan, China. And then it just overlays that information to apply to, say, Idaho. And if you add interventions like closing schools, you get a 33% improvement on transmission. Social distancing rules would decrease transmission another 66%. And Reidenauer says if you add travel restrictions on top of that, well, that would bump it up another 33%. So just by doing those three things, the UW model assumes you would just stop the spread of the disease and it would just go away. Well, Dr. Reidenauer has been working on a Idaho-specific model since January. And it takes into account things like Idaho's rural population, our age distribution, our travel between cities. So it's a better fit for Idaho's leaders to use when they make decisions like this. And they have been using it. But it's not a perfect model. Reidenauer says the data they need to build a more perfect model hasn't always been available.
The data have been coming in fairly consistently. We got some more data from DHW today. So that's really useful, but there are other bits of data that have been hard to track down that we would like to get, like information about how much hospital capacity we have in various areas, how long people are spending in the hospital when they end up showing up at the hospitals, and even just knowing how much testing is actually happening and where testing is going on, right? Those things are all really important to one, getting sort of the overall burden to the healthcare system right, and then knowing when it might be safe to lift interventions or when we might have to put more strict interventions in place.
We get a lot of questions about why are we not talking about the recovery numbers. Are you guys including that in your model? And what are you seeing?
So unfortunately, we're not able to get numbers about recovery. We've asked a little bit about how people are recovering and what the time period is for recoveries. I mean, we get anecdotal evidence. So we're left sort of taking the data that we get that is about just new infections and trying to infer how long it takes for people to recover. And one of the real challenges, which I'm sure you're familiar with, is that there's this large subclinical group of people that are either asymptomatic or they just have sort of mild symptoms, right? So they never go to the doctor, and we don't really know much about that group at all. And so without doing sort of extensive testing and learning about them, it's sort of this blind spot in some of the models.
Are you concerned that the lack of testing or the backlog in testing is kind of hindering your modeling a bit?
It does hinder our modeling, right? In that we don't know exactly how many positives there actually are out there. So that slows things down a bit. That's the backlog bit. We know we can stop doing interventions when people stop testing positive for this thing, right? That's the key bit. And so if you're not testing, you don't know if you can stop, right?
True. You're not making this model public though, right?
Yeah, right now we're keeping this in-house. So we're helping, obviously, the governor's task force do modeling. We're helping other stakeholders within Idaho, so like the city of Boise and other places, run various intervention strategies and models and try to figure out what we might expect if we, say, lifted our social distancing tomorrow or today or in 2 weeks, as the new order might be, right? So we're trying to do that and provide the best information we can to the people that make policy and make the decisions, and then let them run with that information and decide what to do.
Dr. Ridenour says he agrees with Governor Little's decision to extend the stay-at-home order today. As for the plans to make his model public, that is in the works, just not right now. There are already a lot of outside influences trying to direct decisions our leaders have to make, and he says they want to keep it more inside. Show me the money. Well, some college students who might be waiting for a stimulus check are likely waiting for Godot. Yeah, that plays on this semester's syllabus, which is maybe why you didn't get the reference, but there'll be a quiz later. A local farmer isn't waiting for his surplus of spuds to go bad. With the pandemic placing a blow to his bottom line, he's spreading some love with some literally priceless potatoes. Have a question or a comment about today's show? We want to hear from you. Text us at 208-321-5614. But be sure to include your name and the hashtag #the208. We're going to read some of your messages coming up later in the show. Tough decisions. What a lot of businesses are boiling down to these days. One decision for Idaho farmers, what to do with all these crops that they can't seem to use right now. Some have been forced to simply just throw it away. Well, there's a family farm in Oakley. Well, they came to this problem, and instead of just throwing it away, they raised potatoes, by the way, they decided they were going to give them away to whomever wants to swing by. Joe Paris takes us to Cranny Farms.
I wasn't anticipating the bigger responses we've had.
Cranny Farms has thousands of potatoes they were expecting to sell. Now, though, things are much different.
I didn't have really a market for those potatoes. It's something I was going to have to dump or go to like cattle feed.
So Ryan Cranny, CEO of Cranny Farms, decided he was going to share his crop. He advertised on Facebook, writing simply, "Free potatoes."
And so I just felt like it'd be something maybe to give a little bit back to the community. I knew a lot of people are struggling, financially with this shutdown of the economy.
Cranny Farms has operated for about 113 years.
Something like that.
Never in that time have they seen something like this.
There's times there's 20 or 30 cars there at a time. And it looks like they're still headed out there. I'm looking out the window. They're still headed out there now. I think here within the next several hours, most of that's going to be all gone.
So while this pile of potatoes may soon be gone, the questions about what happens next are not. Cranny explains that a majority of potatoes go into the food service. A lot of his product, for example, ends up being French fries.
All the way from the upscale restaurants to just family sit-down diners, things like that. That's just taking a total beating. Food service numbers are down. The restaurant business, maybe as much as 80-85% in places.
These potatoes in a pile will soon be gone. But if pandemic conditions continue, there are millions of dollars worth of potatoes that could have a similar fate.
But unfortunately, there just may not be enough demand, and eventually some of them is going to end up going either for cattle feed or being dumped.
Farmers across the board are wondering what the impact financially will be. For Cranny Farms, it's still wait and see.
And so we won't really know that number until August, but I think it's going to be painful for a lot of people.
Already, though, tough decisions for future seasons have had to be made.
We've decided to cut back the number of acres of potatoes we're planting for the 2020 year. I think the only thing worse than not planting them is to plant them and not have a market for it.
So while the situation is extremely tough for operations like Cranny Farms, Ryan Cranny says it is encouraging to see people coming together, like at his now famous Idaho potato pile.
A lot of the people there were not necessarily gathering potatoes for themselves, but they were gathering them for somebody else and going and delivering those, whether it was to friends or neighbors or family members or somebody they know that's struggling.
Welcome to adulthood. You get nothing. I'll get used to it. Why some college students are left out of Uncle Sam's coronavirus stimulus cash. Do you have a question or a concern or a comment about today's show? Let us know. Text us at 208-321-5614. Be sure to include your name and the hashtag #the208. And remember, spelling does count. We're going to read some of your messages and maybe answer them later in the show.
The winds continue to howl outside, as you know, and they are gusty. A little earlier, we had a wind gust that was up to 38 miles an hour. Some spots could be getting up to about 40 miles an hour. So I'm going to start out by showing you areas around the valley and the wind gusts there. And as you look at this, you'll see some areas even got above 40 miles an hour with some of those winds. So that's a lot here in the area. Just looking at, of course, the winds at this particular time. There it is, 40 miles an hour in Mountain Home, Twin Falls with 43. As we show you also that we do have a wind advisory that's in effect until 9 o'clock tonight. Okay, which will keep some of those gusty winds going, but they're going to likely start to die down just shortly after 8 o'clock. This futurecast shows the storm over the area, but watch this. You see how it clears out? That's by about 10 o'clock this evening. It continues to do that all night as high pressure sets up. Now, we're still going to be cool because of that northerly flow of air for tomorrow, but the winds will die down somewhat, okay, with this. By the time we get into the weekend, look at Saturday. This is Saturday afternoon. Some clouds could start to show up into Sunday because of a storm into western Montana. So speaking about the winds, the gusts for tomorrow up to about 14, 15 miles an hour. So they'll be out of the northwest, nothing as strong as what they had today. And you also see that our temperatures are up around 60 degrees for the afternoon. Latest radar is just showing a few showers mainly over the mountains now, so starting to die down in the way of those isolated thunderstorms, but we'll keep that in the forecast for tonight. As you look here at the temperatures for tomorrow, they're basically into the mid-50s. So warming up to near 70 over the weekend, looking good. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
April 15th, usually known as tax day, but you now have a 2-month extension to pay this year if you live in Idaho, and you have to pay taxes. But we're also looking to get paid right now, right? $1,200, a stimulus bump that was dropped into the bank accounts of a majority of Americans this week. And if you're sitting there wondering, I wish someone would show me the money, you're not alone, especially if you're in that 17 to 23-year-old range. We've got a couple of questions surrounding those Americans transitioning into adulthood, like this one. Hi, 208. We got our stimulus money today, but it did not include the 17-year-old dependent. She filed her own return as a dependent, and she did not receive money either. It's frustrating because 17 to 22 is really when they cost parents the most, but we can't get a break on taxes for them. This one sent in from Judy. Seems kind of odd, right? They're a dependent, I should say, so shouldn't the parents be able to get another $500? Well, according to the CARES Act, no, that money won't be coming. That's the Waiting for Godot reference I made earlier. That's the play by Samuel Beckett. Yeah. Dependents ages 17 to 23 do not qualify for the $500 payment. So if you thought seniors, whether high school or college, already knew or drew the short end of the stick, well, that stick is now even shorter. Forbes breaks it down pretty well for us. If your child is a dependent, but they're 17 to 23 years old, they don't qualify. What if you financially support them, though? The answer is still no. Why? Well, because they're too old. The only way people in this age range could qualify for stimulus funding is if they filed taxes as an independent, on their own, basically. What should have been a spring of excitement through those job offers for college seniors or those acceptance letters for high school seniors, now turning into more of a spring of disappointment. No prom, probably no graduation, no frat parties, and now no COVID cream. So what if you're listening to all of this and still don't even have a stimulus check? Well, those checks went out to 80 million Americans today. Our population, right now, 329.5 million people, according to the U.S. Census. So don't worry, there's still time. The Coronavirus Task Force also said there will be delays for people who are getting their checks by mail versus direct deposit. So keep that in mind. We'll be right back. All right, take a look at some of your comments as we wrap up the 208. This one, a lot of questions from about unemployment these days. What's the difference between furloughed and laid off? Well, furloughed usually means you're still attached to your job. It'll be there when you get back, or it'll still be there when this is all over. Laid off means you're basically going to find another job. That's usually what that means. I've owned my own business. I understand the frustration of not being open. How is it possible to say business is more important than people's lives? That's in from Rhonda. I do not understand. Hairstylist, the one we spoke with, Erin Swenson. Did she apply for unemployment? The all that, an acronym. Yes, she did. She applied for all of that. Problem is, it's been delayed. Like a lot of you are noticing right now, she is having to check every day, and it still shows that it is not processed yet. And so she's been 21 days without any income. Can you guys give a list of some businesses that will now be open? No. I don't know that that's possible, Jennifer. It's going to be a long list. We'll see you tomorrow.